Let's dive right into it today, huh? Coins and tokens. I remember when I was first starting out, honestly, those two terms, they kind of felt like they were used interchangeably, like half the time. And
Yep.
honestly, figuring out the difference, man, it made a world of difference to how I understood, like, the entire crypto space.
Yeah.
So today we're going to clear up any confusion. We've got an expert in the field joining me here to break it all down.
Happy to be here. Glad to help clear things up.
So let's just start with coins. I know they have, like, something to do with blockchains, right?
Yeah, they do. A coin is basically it's a type of digital asset. It operates on its own blockchain. So Bitcoin, for example.
Yeah.
Bitcoin runs on the Bitcoin blockchain. It's like its own little world.
Okay, so it's like its own little kingdom,
Yeah.
right? With the blockchain as, like, the foundation.
That's actually a great way to put it. And like with any good foundation, it provides that underlying structure and the security for the whole system. And for coins, that system is mainly focused on transferring and storing value, much like traditional currencies, really.
Okay, so if I'm sending Bitcoin to a friend, it's like I'm handing them a digital dollar,
hmm
but instead of going through a bank, it's all recorded on this like giant secure ledger.
Exactly, exactly. And depending on the coin and the blockchain it's on, they're going to use different methods to, validate those transactions and keep the network secure. You might have heard of proof of work or proof of stake.
Right.
Those are two common consensus mechanisms, like how they all agree.
Right, like the rules of the road, keep everything running smoothly.
Ex-
Okay, and speaking of all these different coins and their approaches, Litecoin often gets called the silver to Bitcoin's gold. What's the story there?
Litecoin is a great example of how coins, even with really similar goals, can have very unique properties. It was designed for faster transaction speeds and lower fees compared to Bitcoin. So that makes it more, I'd say, more suitable for everyday purchases, like actual digital cash.
Hmm, that makes a lot of sense. But where do tokens fit into all of this? They seem to be everywhere these days, and they're not all about just being like digital money, right?
You're absolutely right. Tokens open up a completely new world of possibilities. I think that's what's so exciting. They don't actually have their own blockchain. Instead, what they do is they're built on existing ones, kind of like setting up shop in, a bustling city. You're using the foundation that's already there.
So using our like kingdom analogy, if coins are the independent nations, tokens are more like businesses operating within those nations, benefiting from all that infrastructure that's already been built.
Exactly. And one of the most popular foundations for tokens, I'm sure you've heard of it, is Ethereum. And that's largely because of its ability to execute smart contracts, which have a lot of people excited.
Ah, smart contracts. This always sounded so futuristic to me.
Yeah.
What makes them so special?
They're essentially self-executing agreements written in code. So let's say you're selling something online. With a smart contract, literally the moment the buyer sends that payment ownership of whatever that digital item is, it could automatically transfer to them. No need for a middleman at all.
Wow. So it's like a digital escrow system, kind of. Automating that trust and making the whole thing, the whole transaction, much smoother.
Yeah.
That's incredible. No wonder tokens are, like, seriously gaining traction.
Absolutely. And because of that flexibility, tokens can go way beyond just representing like monetary value. They can represent access to a service, ownership of a digital asset, even voting rights in like a decentralized organization. The possibilities are truly vast.
Okay, now I'm really starting to see the difference here. Coins are like the sort of foundational layer. They're focused on value transfer, while tokens are building upon that, exploring all sorts of really wild applications.
Precisely. And to really grasp the potential, let's maybe dive into some specific examples. Yeah. Have you heard of Chainlink?
The name rings a bell, but I'd love to hear more about what makes it tick.
It's a fantastic example of what we call a utility token. Think of Chainlink like a bridge. It's bridging the real world and the blockchain. It securely connects real world data like stock prices, even weather information, to smart contracts. And that opens up so many possibilities for all these decentralized applications that rely on accurate data.
So if a smart contract needs to know, like, the absolute latest stock price to execute a trade, Chainlink acts as that reliable messenger. It ensures that the data is accurate and trustworthy.
Exactly. It's like having like a super secure data feed for the blockchain, essential for tons of applications, especially in decentralized finance, which relies on this real world data.
That makes so much more sense now. It's like the missing piece of the puzzle. It's
Mhm.
bringing that real-world data onto the blockchain. But speaking of real-world applications, I know there's one type of token that's been making waves even outside of the crypto space, NFTs. What's your take on those?
NFTs are a fascinating example, really, of how tokens can represent these unique digital assets. And they've definitely, they've captured the public imagination, haven't they? But I think beyond all those headlines about the digital art selling for like millions, NFTs have this potential to really, truly revolutionize how we think about ownership, in the digital world especially.
Yeah, it's like you own the original copy of a digital file, which, like, in a world where everything can be so easily copied and shared, that's a big deal to be able to say you have the original.
Exactly. And that opens up so many possibilities, not just for artists, but musicians, writers, even, gamers getting in on this. Imagine owning a piece of virtual real estate in like your favorite game, or having that like unique verifiable copy of a digital collectible. NFTs could really change the game completely.
Yeah, it's like the Wild West out there right now, you know?
Yeah,
Everyone trying to figure out how best to actually use this technology.
it really is. It really is. But I think before we get too lost, in a sea of all these possibilities, let's bring it back to just the fundamental difference between coins and tokens.
Uh-huh.
Because it's easy to get caught up in the specific examples without really grasping what those core distinctions are, right?
Yeah, good point. So if we're like really trying to solidify our understanding here, what are the like key things to keep in mind?
Well, I'd say at the absolute most basic level, it all boils down to their purpose, like their core functionality. Coins are like primarily designed for value transfer and storage. They're the digital equivalent of physical money. That's the easiest way to think about it.
Okay, so if I'm thinking about like investing in a coin, I should approach it with a similar mindset to how I would, traditional currencies, considering things like supply and demand, adoption rates, overall market sentiment, all that.
Exactly, exactly. You're thinking along the right lines there. Now, tokens, on the other hand, they have a much wider range of applications. I think that's what throws people off. They can represent anything, truly anything, from voting rights in a decentralized organization to access to a particular, maybe exclusive service or platform. So many things.
It's like the difference between like owning a piece of gold versus owning a share in a company. Like both have value for sure, but their worth is determined by completely different factors, and what they do is completely different.
That's a great analogy. That's a really good way to put it. And it highlights exactly why understanding the specific purpose and functionality of a token is so crucial. Before investing, before you get involved in a project at all, it's not just about the technology itself. It's about, okay, what's the use case? Who's behind it? What problem are they even trying to solve? All of that matters.
So if I'm looking at some brand new token, I
Sure.
shouldn't just like jump in because the name sounds cool or it's got a catchy name or something. I need to actually like do my research, understand what it actually does,
Yeah.
who's behind it. Yeah, like you said, what problem are they trying to solve,
Right.
if any?
Precisely. And this is even more important because, the regulatory landscape for tokens, it's still evolving. It's the Wild West out there in a different way. So depending on how a token is structured, how it's used, it might fall under totally different regulations. And that can have a huge impact on its long-term, viability. It might not even be viable depending on how the regulations shake out.
There's a complex landscape out there, that's for sure. And it's definitely an area where staying informed is absolutely key. But amidst all this talk of coins and tokens and regulations, we can't forget about the real, like, I don't know, the game changer here, which is decentralization. This whole idea of shifting power away from those big centralized entities, those big institutions, and actually distributing it amongst the users. That's powerful. That's a powerful idea.
Absolutely. And it's a core principle that really underpins both coins and tokens. But I think what's particularly exciting is how this decentralization is kind of like manifesting in the world of these decentralized applications, right? What we call dApps.
dApps. Yeah, they've been popping up everywhere. I'll admit I'm still a little fuzzy on what actually makes them different from regular apps.
At their core, dApps are applications that run on a decentralized network, like a blockchain, right? Rather than on a single company's server. So what this means is they're not controlled by any one single entity, which makes them way more resistant to censorship, outages, even just like other issues that can plague those centralized platforms. We've all been there.
So if I'm using a dApp, I don't have to worry about a company suddenly like, I don't know, changing their terms of service on me, or just shutting the service down one day, or selling my data without my consent, all that kind of stuff. That's a huge deal.
Exactly. And it's a major reason why a lot of people, they really believe that apps represent, the future of the internet. And guess what often plays a crucial role in how these dApps function, how they interact with their users?
Tokens, right. They're like the fuel that's powering this whole dApp ecosystem, aren't they?
You got it. Tokens can be used for so many different purposes within a dApp. They can be used for governance, giving users actual voting rights on like how the platform should evolve, what it should do next. They can be used as incentives, rewarding users for, contributing to the network, or they can even just be used for accessing specific features or services within that dApp.
It's like having like a digital key that unlocks all these new possibilities within this app or this ecosystem, really.
And what's even more fascinating is how these apps and their tokens are actually being used to create like entirely new models of governance, new forms of community ownership, like decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs.
DAOs. Now, those sound interesting. What are those all about? DAOs. Those sound like something straight out of, like, I don't know, a sci-fi novel or something. What are we talking about here?
Yeah.
Sentient AI taking over the world?
Not quite yet. Not quite yet. Although, that does make for an interesting thought experiment, doesn't it? But in simple terms, a DAO is basically, it's like a company or an organization. But instead of it being controlled by, like a CEO, a board of directors, it's actually governed by its members
No?
with decisions made collectively,
Yes.
through these voting mechanisms,
Mm.
often using, you guessed it, tokens.
So instead of having that traditional, like, top-down hierarchy, it's more like this distributed network of, like, individuals all coming together to make decisions kind of democratically in a way.
Exactly. And because everything is, recorded and verified on the blockchain, it brings this whole other level of transparency and accountability to how organizations can actually function. It's still early days, I'd say, for DAOs, but they have this potential, I think, to really revolutionize everything from how we, like, fund projects to even just, how we make decisions as a collective. It's a whole different way of thinking about it.
It's like, it really is like the internet's native way of organizing and collaborating.
Yeah.
Cutting out all those middlemen and empowering, the actual individuals to have a direct say. That's cool. It's incredibly exciting, even if it is, a bit mind-boggling to wrap your head around sometimes.
It definitely challenges, I think, those traditional notions of like how organizations should function, right? But I think that's part of what makes this whole space so dynamic and innovative. It's like we're seeing all these new possibilities emerge practically every day.
It's like watching like the early days of the internet kind of unfold all over again. It's really cool. So with all these different coins and tokens and decentralized applications kind of like popping up left and right, are there any specific trends that you're like particularly excited about right now?
One area that's really caught my eye is the rise of what we call real-world asset tokenization. So we're starting to see everything, and I mean everything, from real estate to fine art to even like renewable energy being represented on the blockchain through tokens.
So instead of like owning the physical deed to a property, you might own a token that represents your share of that asset digitally.
Precisely. And what this does is it has the potential to make investing way more accessible, way more transparent, and way more liquid. Just imagine, you could buy a fractional share of like a solar farm with like a few clicks, and it's all tracked, it's all managed securely on the blockchain. That's the kind of future that this technology could enable, which I think is incredibly exciting.
Yeah. It's like taking all the complexities and honestly all the inefficiencies of these old traditional systems and like streamlining them, making them better through the power of the blockchain. It's really cool to think about the impact this could have across like all these different industries, really.
Absolutely. And as with, any emerging technology, anytime you have something new like this, there are going to be challenges. There are going to be hurdles to overcome. Regulation is a big one. Scalability, public understanding. These are all key factors that are going to really shape where this whole space goes.
That's a journey we're all on together.
Yeah.
Right. Figuring it out as we go. But that's part of the adventure, I think.
Absolutely. And that's exactly why it's so important to, stay curious, stay informed, never stop learning. This is a dynamic space. It changes so rapidly. And those who can, embrace that change, stay ahead of the curve, they're the ones who are going to benefit the most from this. It's a really exciting time to be involved.
Well said. Well said. I know I've learned a ton today, from like those core differences between coins and tokens to just like the mind-blowing potential of dApps and DAOs. Like, it's clear to me that this technology it's really poised to like disrupt and revolutionize tons of industries. And I'm excited to see where this journey takes us next.
Me too. And for anyone listening, remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg here. We've just scratched the surface. There's a whole world of knowledge out there, resources, communities just waiting to be explored. So dive in. Ask those questions. Don't be afraid to kind of get your hands dirty. The
Yeah,
future of, I think, finance, technology, maybe even society itself, it might depend on it.
I completely agree. A huge thank you to our expert for taking us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of coins and tokens. And to you, our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, keep asking those big questions. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.